I am a humanist working in the technology field.
So what do you think is the AI transformation for those companies?
Do you want to optimize the things that you're doing right now, or do you want to really innovate?
That's a very interesting framework. Why is now everyone talking about AI?
The fact that you can interact with it almost like an AGI, so that's a thing that I think kind of blew people's minds because we just leapfrog.
Welcome to the Startup Huddle. I'm your host, Josef Maruvčák, and I'm excited to introduce you to the current and upcoming leaders of the startup tech world. We'll discuss digital products and key takeaways for life and professional growth. So grab a coffee and let's huddle up.
Hey everyone, today we are here with Tatyana Mamut. She's a very innovative thought leader, especially in the space of AI. Thanks very much for joining us, Tatyana.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. So today I would like to first a little bit start with your background because it's very rich and interesting. You have quite a thorough understanding of different areas related to tech and to business. Then I would like to jump into your take on the current state of AI and on the AI transformation, especially within the context of, let's say, larger companies, low-tech maturity companies. And then you have a very interesting take on also the future and how we should treat the AI so that we are on the safe side of things. So very excited for that.
Great. I'm excited too. So I'll just jump in to introducing myself. I am a humanist working in the technology field, and this is not what my parents wanted for me because as we talked about, I'm from Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine. My mother's an engineer. My father's an engineer. My grandmother was a very high level engineer in the Soviet Union. Like she created the entire system for manufacturing fiberglass in the Soviet Union. She was, basically a very high powered engineer. My brother's an engineer. My aunt's an engineer. And so I was the black sheep in the family because I did not want to become an engineer. I wanted to become a social scientist. And I was always fascinated by humans as opposed to technology in my family, where everybody else in my family was always talking about technology. I was talking about how people use technology, what was technology for, and what are the things that we are building, and how is society changing. And so that really led me to the discipline of economics at first, because I thought I could model human behavior with math, right? I was all mathy, of course, coming from this very engineering heavy family. They were math. And so my first degree was in economics, econometrics, and game theory, which, game theory was very interesting for understanding how humans behave. Built a lot of competitive correction models in statistics in order to understand how different societies were behaving. And I studied the post-Soviet economic transition, especially in Russia, for much of my initial academic foundation. And then the 1998 crisis happened. And I realized that everything that I was modeling was totally wrong. Not just that I was modeling, but the best economists in the world were completely and terribly, utterly wrong. And so this led me to a crisis. This crisis was, what is happening? Why were we all so wrong? Why didn't Russians behave the way that we thought and modeled and predicted that they would behave? What is happening? And so I started reading anthropology. I started understanding culture. I started understanding how people really interact, how are mental models created in the world, and how do humans, in their social context, in our social context, start to really model our behaviors and create behaviors, not based on some abstract mathematical function, but based on the mental models that we have in our minds, the ways in which we interact with other people, the ways in which we create identities. And so that then took me into a long career after getting a PhD in anthropology, still focused on economic anthropology, the same questions that I had been studying in economics, but really from a more humanistic perspective, a human-centered perspective. And that then took me into going to Russia to launch new brands and new products into the Russian market, which required a lot of rethinking of the products themselves. So working primarily with Procter & Gamble and other companies to really reformulate what does product experience look like in a new market. And then I was hired by IDEO, which is the global design and innovation firm, to lead a lot of their international product development and projects. And then during one of those international projects, actually working for Visa, the payment system, I brought them Bitcoin, and I said, actually, global currency may look more like Bitcoin than what we think about as the fiat US dollar. And this was 2010, and they laughed me out of the room. So then I started to continue to really push forward on technology, on really emerging technologies. What were the new ideas that were coming out? And then I went to Salesforce to lead the Lightning Experience redesign. Again, taking a human-centered approach to really what do people want and desire from their experiences. Built the Internet of Things cloud at Salesforce as well. And then the executive that I was working with went to AWS to build Honeycode. So I went with him, and I was the first general manager to build Honeycode at AWS. Then started also going into social media with Nextdoor, being chief product officer there, building a new product experience for Pendo. So then again, this whole human-centered approach allowed me to be successful in product innovation again and again and again. And what's really interesting is I would say, there are no coincidences in the world, but through a very strange confluence of coincidences, I found myself having quit my job at Pendo, my full-time job at Pendo. I stayed on as an advisor exactly a year ago. And at the same time, the job I was going to take, I decided not to take, again, through a very strange set of circumstances and events, which had nothing to do with the actual job itself. And then ChatGPT came out, like literally, like the same moment that I decided that I was free through the strange confluence of events. ChatGPT came out, and I had been working with AI, predictive AI for a long time at Salesforce, at Nextdoor with feed ranking. Obviously, we were using predictive AI and ML for a long time, working with the great Pendo team in Israel on a lot of the AI experiences in Pendo. But this was something new. This was obviously, a lot of us know that this was not just a predictive intelligence, right? It didn't seem like an algorithm. It seemed like you were interacting with a real intelligence. It seemed like there was the potential of consciousness, a potential of real interpersonal connection with ChatGPT. So for the last year, I've been really diving deep into advising startups, advising big companies on how to shift and create their AI strategy. But as an anthropologist and as a humanist, what my passion has also been is to really explore the terrains of the future and what is becoming possible, right, in our interspecies future. And we can talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, thanks very much for the summary. As I said, quite a rich career. By the way, I'm the second black sheep here. My whole family was always they were also and always lawyers. Then I studied law, and now I'm doing something which is not very comprehensible for them. But that's also like Eastern Europe. So right now, you, after all the experiences that you had, you landed on in the job of trying to understand AI, and especially the use of AI for whether it's startups or larger companies. Kind of interesting here as well that around the time when the ChatGPT was introduced to the market, Sudolabs also started exploring AI transformation for larger companies, and already we have some great clients in the media and advertising space, or large business process companies, call centers, for example. And so I'm also very, very interested in your take here. So let's maybe focus on larger companies, medium-sized enterprises to large corporates. what do you think? And everyone now talks about AI transformation. So what do you think is the AI transformation for those companies? What does it even mean?
Yeah. So if you think about a 2x2 axis, right? I think that the space of opportunities for AI transformation, if you think about the y axis, right, is do you want to optimize the things that you're doing right now, or do you want to really innovate, right, and create a completely new offering, right, based on AI, right? So that's the y axis. And then the x axis is internal systems and processes. And then on the other side is the external, right? The customer facing products, right? That you're offering to customers, right? So if you think about that 2x2, and at another point, if people come and see one of my talks, I'll put this all up on the screen. If you think about that 2x2, that's really like the terrain of transformation that large companies are faced with. On the lower corner, right, the internal optimization, right, that's a lot of things that you can just, get off the shelf, right? That is basically summarizing meeting notes, right, summarizing things that are happening internally, really helping, automate some of your processes, those types of things, right, without really innovating anything huge. If you move up, right, to innovating on internal workflows, you can actually start to reimagine your workflows completely based on AI. So I'm advising a couple of, especially in the product and engineering field, there are lots of ways to really start innovating on the fundamental workflow between product managers, designers, and developers now with generative AI, because you can actually completely rethink, right, who does what in the product development process, right? So product managers can actually very quickly mock up wireframes on their own without ever having to go to a designer, right? Or to create then a product prototype, right? And start to do research on that before ever going to a design team. A product manager can also do a lot of, kind of prototyping, right, in terms of development, right, without going to a developer, right, and using their time. So you can actually rethink entire workflows with AI, and especially generative AI tools. On the customer side, right, now that's the internal side. So that is definitely a piece of the transformation that I see a lot of companies immediately starting to go after. And it excites me a lot because I'm advising quite a few of the B2B SaaS products that are using generative AI to either optimize current systems and processes, or to completely rethink workflows. And that's pretty exciting because you can actually also completely rethink the work of managers, right? There's a lot of ways in which a lot of the management functions can actually be done by AI as well, in terms of feedback and oversight and all those kinds of things. Okay, so on the customer side, in the optimized quadrant, this is again where you can buy a lot of solutions off the shelf. So there's an incredible product that I am advising as well called Product Pilot. So having customers interact with a chatbot that's based on your documentation for your product can often be a much better experience than having an SDR or a frontline customer service rep, right, doing it, because it's available all the time, gives really good explanations. So that's a place where customers now, you can buy off the shelf tools to really optimize your customer interactions and experiences, right? The hardest part, and this is where everybody wants to go, but this is really, really hard, is how to completely innovate your offering based on generative AI. And the reason it's really hard is because there are so many ideas. And if you're a company, you have limited resources. So the fundamental difference between a venture capital firm and a company in terms of innovating and making bets is a venture capital firm can make 100 investments in the generative AI space. Well, depending on the size of their fund, but you know what I mean, right? They can make a lot of different investments. If you are a company, you have to make just one or two. You have to bet on a much, much smaller portfolio So if you have, obviously, the common notion is that 90% of all, startups fail, meaning 90% of all product innovation efforts fail, because really startups are just attempts at product innovation in a market. But I have a process where you can improve that by 3x to get closer to the Amazon batting average of, 3 out of 10 succeed, right? So 7 out of 10 fail, which is still much better than 9 out of 10 failing. But if you're in a big company, you still usually can't play those odds, right? So you have to have a great deal of confidence that the thing that you're pursuing is actually going to be valuable to your customer. Mm-hmm. And so this is where the magic really happens. And this is where it's very important, I think, for companies to get an outside perspective and to get help, because it's so easy to get inside groupthink and not really understand what's happening outside in the world. And to have connections with other companies and have kind of cross-pollination if you're trying to innovate for customers with generative AI. It's really important to get help at the current moment, because it's too hard to figure it out yourself. There's just too many options.
That's I think a very interesting framework on how to approach like the current state of AI and the opportunities there. But maybe just to give maybe a little bit more context. So why is everyone talking about AI right now? So we know that most of the technologies, even when you were working for Salesforce and had some touch point with like Einstein, for example, there. Mm-hmm. Most of the technologies that were available a year ago are still available now, and nothing's like, especially in terms of neural networks and predictions and understanding the big data. It's been here for a long time, and it still is. The major changer seems to be ChatGPT. Yet, like as you said, like most of the companies are currently investing in technology that was available before. So, what do you think happened on the market, especially also from the anthropological perspective, as you try to understand people and the companies? Why is now everyone talking about AI, given that there is only like a small thing that happened consumer facing, given the LLMs?
Yeah. So I'm going to give you another 2x2, because we all love frameworks, right? It just helps us understand things. So if you think about the AI, this is the basic AI landscape framework that I talk people through. So if you think about the y-axis, you have domain specific at the bottom and generalized at the top. Okay. That's the y-axis. And then on the x-axis, you have predictive versus generative, right? So domain specific versus generalized, and then you have predictive versus generative. Mostly before like a year ago, everybody was playing in the bottom left quadrant, right? Predictive and domain specific. So Salesforce, right? One of the very first things that came out with Einstein was two things that I personally worked on and imagined for within Lightning Experience. The first one was with lead scoring, right? What was the lead score for this particular lead that was coming in? Was it a high priority lead? Was it a low priority lead? Right? And that was the system learned that by getting a lot of data about leads and about a very domain specific, type of data about leads that actually then converted right into sales, and which ones did not convert into sales. And then it discovered what are the attributes on its own, right? And was able to predict. And then the next best step, right? What's the next best step in the sales process? And again, lots of information about lots of different opportunities came in, and then the system learned, and discovered on its own through supervised and unsupervised learning. Actually, they were using unsupervised learning even at the time, about, okay, what's going on? What's the best next step? What ChatGPT did was it completely leapfrogged us. It didn't take us into it didn't move us up into the quadrant, into an adjacent quadrant. It didn't move us sideways into an adjacent quadrant. It moved us entirely into the upper right-hand quadrant, because ChatGPT is a generative and generalized experience. It's a generative and generalized experience as opposed to domain specific and predictive. And so I think that's why it blew people's minds. Like if it had been a domain specific domain specific generative experience, I think it wouldn't have blown so many people's minds. But the fact that you can interact with it almost like an AGI, that's the thing that it just kind of shocked people, because it felt like you were actually talking to a human being who wasn't trained on a narrow piece of knowledge, but actually had like a lot of knowledge that was comparable to an educated person. So that's the thing that I think kind of blew people's minds, because we just leapfrogged into the upper right-hand quadrant from the lower left-hand quadrant. And so now what everybody's trying to do is they're trying to move into the lower right-hand quadrant, which was domain-specific generative. Right. So now that all our minds are blown in being able to chat with this thing about, what's its opinion on Shakespeare, or write me a sonnet, or write me a haiku about whatever topic in the style of whoever, or you can interact with it in the style of, your favorite dead author. Now people are saying, okay, now how do we take this magic of a really smart person and interacting with a smart person about any topic and bring it into a domain specific application? And that's really actually much harder than it seems, because what's really exciting about ChatGPT is the UX, is this experience of just asking it and getting this amazing response back. And that's not a competitive advantage. So I see startup after startup after startup that are taking what currently exists and creating a pretty fun experience by creating this chat-based interface around the data, but they're actually not solving the hard part. And they're not building a moat when they do that, because really anybody could do that. The hard part is getting that data without a lot of data entry, or really finding unique data, right? And so that's where there's a lot of conversation about, yes, this feels great, but it's not going to be a sustainable product that's going to grow over $20 million. Because if you're really successful, it's really easy for somebody else for a big player to do the same thing.
Yeah, and I think that you're completely right there. We see this on the market right now, that most of the startups that are growing in the AI space are some sort of something built upon ChatGPT or OpenAI, which for once, makes it easy for everyone else to copy you, but also you're fully dependent on the existence of OpenAI and of them being still successful. On top of that, and that's I think the question that I wanted to ask. Most of those models, therefore, or those products are not necessarily secure from the corporate perspective, right, or from a large companies' perspective. So, how would you say the companies that want to innovate, that want to transform, whether it's like their internal process to optimize it, or even build like something completely new for the users, how they should look at all this incredible amount of new products that are being launched, how to keep track on those products, what is there, and how to decide whether we want to use it or not?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is, I don't think it's a problem to build on OpenAI APIs, or any other Anthropic APIs, or anybody else's API. That's like saying it's a problem to have all your data in S3 because AWS might go down. Okay, it might, but I don't think that's really a problem. I think there is an issue about what you stated right now in terms of putting your data or sharing data with a large language model, or a system that does not guarantee security. And it's less, I think it's less about the data potentially being accessed, although there was this bug discovered just this week that if you make it say the same word, infinitely, then it starts to spit out training data. But that's less of that's just the security issue that they're going to patch, I'm sure. But I think it's more the legal aspect. So you do need to have a legal advisor on all of this, because the reason that was explained to me about why you don't want to use ChatGPT to put, for example, your product specs into, or to help you write PRDs, is because it might show that if you were ever to get into litigation, that you weren't taking care to keep the information secret or confidential. So there's actually legal aspects of which tools you use that you actually probably need to get a lawyer, to really help with. And so Natasha Allen, this was a presentation by her. She's one of the top lawyers in the AI space. And so she, does a lot of talk. She has a lot of content online that you can look up to get some of this information, just the high level. But those are some of the concerns that to a technologist, I'm like, well, it's not just going to it's not like a database. It's not like somebody can go in there and if you wrote something in your PRD that somebody else can retrieve it, like a database, like with a SQL query or something like that. So that doesn't really make sense to me. But there is like a lot of different aspects around that. So I don't think it's a problem to build on OpenAI. But the question is, again, if you're going to build something that truly has a moat, you really need to think about what data you have that's proprietary, or how will your moat be built, and what is the architecture that you're going to build in addition, right, to the OpenAI capabilities, that's really going to make your product unique, right? And not just the product experience of having a back and forth chat, not just the UI, right? But actually what's going to make your product truly defensible in the long term, and why are you going to win when many other companies might be doing the same thing. And again, that's really the hard part around it. And there is no simple solution to that. If you have amazing proprietary data that you can use and that isn't owned by your customers, but that is owned by you, which is another caveat that I often see, you have that, right? And then you want to build an architecture, right, that really allows for that to be your moat over the long term. And if you don't, there might be partnerships or a go-to-market strategy, right, that really helps you build a moat. So I talked a lot with startups and big companies that are building new AI products around, okay, maybe there's a go-to-market approach, and it probably has to do with partnerships and the type of customers that you pursue first in your go-to-market. But those are the main areas that we talk about.
And so, because we're working already on AI transformation or AI advisory with many companies, I guess that some of them are, as you said, early stage, some of them are later stages or even corporate. So what would you say is like sort of the lowest hanging fruit for larger companies? Where should they look at? Like, if you presented a very good framework, now what do you see is the pathway where most of the companies go? Or is it like completely dependent on the industry and on the particular? Do you see any trends there?
Yeah, so the lowest hanging fruit is in the optimization area, right? So when, there's a ton of generative AI products that you can look out into the market for. And I think I'm going to start in 2024 just doing a roundtable of just new startups that I see and new products that I see, just because I see them literally every day. And I'm not going to create a map that I'm going to update every day. But there's a ton of products right now that you can buy or plug into your existing products to optimize your internal processes to save, money, time, cost. And there's a ton of already existing tools that you can also integrate into your current customer facing experience that can really help to increase those experiences. So that said, right, that is where most people are starting right now, right? So you can buy, again, Product Pilot to help you with the customer facing side. You can buy a lot of, internal tools like Verity.ai, which is a new product management tool to help you optimize your internal processes. But the actual magic, and this is where we're still kind of trying to figure out how to do it is in the innovation space. How do we innovate our fundamental business critical workflows, and how do we innovate the fundamental customer experience based on generative AI? And where will the most value come from in those two regions, in that innovation space? And that's where you have to get back into what will people really value in the future, right? This is where right now I see a lot of technologies chasing a problem. And just like we did, just like in the early days of the internet, to be quite honest, right? Lots of startups where, the technology was able to, or even more recently, a lot of the VR stuff, right? Yeah, we can do virtual meetings with a VR headset on, but who wants to do that? Right? So
Yeah.
before you start pouring millions of dollars into innovating based on AI, there was a recent lesson here, right, with VR. Don't do that. Figure out what people want first, and then figure out how to apply the technology.
Yeah, you're right. So it seems that sort of the lowest hanging fruit is internal, like business process optimization or process optimization generally. And it seems like most of the companies are already doing that. So it's sort of the necessity for most of the companies to do that in order to like keep pace with like the costs and overhead and all that kind of stuff. But like the real gold mine is and the real golden egg is in the space of actually innovating the service and providing something different to the market compared to the rest. And this is obviously the hardest job because there's the most innovation there and the landscape is very quickly evolving. I just have one follow-up question regarding the use of generative AI for internal purposes and for internal process optimization. How do you know which tools to use? Because if you're in a large organization and already to change the way how you approach work, you might have thousands of people. It takes some time and it takes a lift and it's a pain. What to do in case the tool that you are using simply disappears, which is happening all the time as well. Because even in the AI space, only a few companies survive. So I think that this is also something that we see is the companies consider to be a risk. So how do you know how to know what's on the market and how to know like which companies to start using?
I advise almost every startup that I talk to build out their integrations. So whatever the stack that they're optimizing for. So if they have an AI tool to help with the sales process, like Revcast, number one step, fully integrate with Salesforce. Don't make people do something or invest a lot of data entry or invest a lot in retraining, right, when they're already trained on Salesforce. If they're doing something in the product development space, I say step one, integrate with Atlassian, right? What is the information that you can get from Confluence and Jira? Again, same issue. So I always look at what is the stack, right? What is the fundamental backbone of the process that the company is, kind of entering into? And then how do they actually integrate into what people are currently doing in large enterprises? And that might narrow your ICP, your ideal customer profile in the beginning, but you're more likely to make, your initial deals because the story that, oh, hey, we're already integrated, or with Okta. So, one startup I talked to yesterday, incredible product, but it requires a browser plugin. And I said, look, when you're selling to enterprises, you're going to have a lot of security conversations. So why don't you actually integrate with Okta, be one of like the Okta partners that's listed on their website, because then you automatically, already the IT department knows how to work with that type of browser extension, and she's like, but not everybody has that. And I'm like, okay, you narrow your ICP, you narrow your potential market initially, but that's okay because you're going to be more likely to be addressing people who already know how to work with a particular workflow. right? Based on the tool that they're already using. So that's my number one recommendation. And so as a company, if it's a large enterprise, right, if you're buying one of these tools that's deeply integrated, then one, if the startup does go away, if the worst case scenario happens, you don't have to retrain all your people. It's like that feature is missing now, right? And you go back to doing things the way you did before until the fundamental product that you're working with offers a solution. And by the way, the other great thing about that is that your fundamental partner, your first partner, will be highly motivated to make sure that if a lot of their customers are using a tool and it's about to go away, that they will offer a solution. And they will, they have large VC arms, they have lots of capabilities. If customers are going to really miss it, they have big biz dev departments, and they will figure out a way to make sure you're not completely screwed in your workflow. So that is what I tell every single startup in the B2B SaaS space that's doing something around AI is, what is the stack that you're working in and who is the main partner that you can integrate with so that you don't have to have a whole retraining conversation or a big professional services business, right? In order to get people to adopt your software.
Makes sense. Seems like you have it figured out. So maybe my last question in this topic.
I don't have it figured out,
but you are on the right track. Maybe the last question here, and that ties well to the service that you are offering, maybe the service that Sudolabs is offering as well, that we haven't talked about much, but mostly interested in your opinion here. Why do you think the companies need external consultants to properly execute the AI transformation, or at least figure out the strategy? Why do you think this is a good idea other than doing it internally?
So there are really two reasons. The first, and both of them have to do with the reality of being an executive in a large company, which I've been many times. So the reality of being an executive of a large company is that the people that you interact with 90% of the time are your colleagues. And you all have a similar perspective and point of view because you're all part of the same conversation. And it's really hard to get, so reason one is it's really hard to get new information outside of the conversations that are happening within your company, right? So, certainly both at Salesforce and at AWS, there were certain executives, including the CEO, who would be invited to these big global events, and they would see one idea, and then they would come back from the World Economic Forum and be super excited about this one idea. And then everybody in the company starts going in that one idea, in that one direction. But there may be 16 other directions that are also happening simultaneously that the people in the company are not seeing because the top executive has told everybody that this is what he wants everybody to really learn and focus on. So you need breadth of experience and you need breadth of perspective as you're looking at alternatives and as you're in the ideation phase. An external perspective is really, really, really helpful to help you understand if you're missing something. The second reason is in the decision-making process, because again, there is a certain inertia in a company because of the hierarchy in an organization. And it's not even like people are lying to you. It's just, people look up to their role models, right? And if their boss and their boss's boss both agree on a particular direction, it's very hard when 100% of your income is based on your boss and your boss's boss to disagree with them. When you're a consultant, no individual client is 100% of your income. So you have a lot more freedom to really, in the decision-making process, really advocate for a perspective that the client may not be seeing. Now, not all consultants work this way. I hear McKinsey definitely doesn't work this way, but some consultants do. right? And you want consultants who are willing to really, in the decision-making process, be there with you and not play devil's advocate. I don't believe in devil's advocate. I believe that you're in the angel's advocate. I believe that a good consultant is there in the decision-making process to be the angel on your shoulder to tell you, like, actually, I understand that this is the majority of you in the company and this is your decision 100%. At the same time, what I'm seeing, and for these reasons, I actually think this is the right alternative. And
Yeah,
so right now, with so much churn, it's so hard to do either one of those two things when you're fully employed inside a company.
yes, I completely agree with that. And I think that, what you described is generally how good consultants should work. But especially in this space where there is such a knowledge gap between the current decision makers and the current employees about the AI, that it's even hard to catch up. So you should definitely rely on people who are fully 100% focused on that one particular area and could regain the knowledge and actually understand what's going on in the space.
Exactly. And can bring you that, right? Because, and it's not because, no, by the way, this is how all companies work. This is not about like, oh, if you just got your company to be somehow more externally focused, like as long as people have 100% of their income reliant on this one job, there's going to be a single train of thought in the company. And that's just reality.
That's correct, indeed. Okay, Tatyana. So maybe this was very helpful. Hopefully, this will be useful for most of our listeners and even larger companies to at least get a good idea about how to navigate the space and why they should use and consider using external consultants. Now, maybe just a few minutes because we are shortly running out of time, but it's a very interesting yet the most controversial topic as well here that you are fully focused on. So, tell us a little bit more about. Before the podcast, you've sent me a few articles, and you are a strong believer in the idea that actually AI is a threat for humanity and can become a threat for humanity, and that there are certain things we need to do in order to minimize the threat. And what's actually very interesting about the view is that you really combined your, background in anthropology and understanding humans with the current way how we build tech and how we treat tech. So maybe if you can tell us a little bit more about what you see, why do you believe that AI is a threat to humanity and how we should treat it to maybe minimize the chance that this will happen and this will have a bad impact.
Okay. So I also have a 2x2 about this, but I'm just going to simplify this right now. So when people talk about existential risk, what are they talking about? Okay. So I'm just going to really simplify this. And I'm going to say existential risk is the risk of humans dying, right? It's like the risk to human existence, right? Which is like, and then there's two types of human existence. The first is individual human existence, right? Like killing of individual humans. And then there's the risk of killing humanity as we know it. Not 100% of humanity. It could be whatever, 80% or 90%, but like humanity as we know it. Okay. So here's the thing. We already see evidence. Generative AI. Oh, and then there's actually, okay, there is another aspect of the 2x2 that is important, which is AI doing it itself or bad actors using AI, right, to kill other people. Okay. So if we look at individual humans dying, we see this already. So if you have not heard of the Alexa Penny Challenge or the researcher in, I believe, England, who actually killed himself because he was convinced by a generative AI agent to do it, look those up. So generative AI on its own is already creating great threat and great existential death risk to individual humans. So what that tells me is without a different type of control. And remember, the Alexa Penny challenge, the girl didn't actually die because she was smart enough to say no. But you can imagine a situation in which somebody would do what the AI tells them to do and be convinced in the other example, right, with the researcher, where they would actually do it, and then it's game over. So now we have a conversation where we're not talking about if this is possible, if AI can kill people, just how many people can it kill, right? So let's just say that is the terrain that we're in. We're not talking about, oh, and by the way, there's a lot of generative AI being used by bad actors in order to incite riots and instability around the world as well, okay? So humans are dying. Individual humans or small groups of humans are already dying because of the use of generative AI, and both used by bad actors and the AI itself, generatively, not with bad actors involved, right, causing existential risk to human life. So now we're in a question of how many humans, right? And that question, we won't know until we see it. And when we see it, it's going to be too late. But the fundamental issue is we're already seeing generative AI be used to end human life. And if we're already seeing that, and the capabilities of AI are growing, and generative and autonomous agentive AI is coming, and it is connected to the internet, why in the world would we think it would stop unless we do something else, unless we really address the super alignment issue? Why do we think that it will stop killing humans and not increase the scale of the killing once it is more capable? That's the fundamental thing. I'm an empiricist in this. I'm not an ideologue in this. And I'm saying we already see it doing these things. So why do we think it's going to stop unless as it becomes more capable? That's simply my perspective.
Yes, understood. I mean, it is to a certain extent controversial, but also at the same time, you're not claiming that it is gonna create, it will control humanity, and it will also at the same time regain its own consciousness probably. But even the problem that already the spread of AI is putting people in danger because the AI doesn't understand, all the aspects of morality and how, it doesn't. Simply the spread of the new products in the AI space is a threat to us. So understood there. And so what do you
It's not
think
even
is
a threat. It's already, it's like what
Yeah.
I'm saying is it's already happening empirically. If you look, it's already killing people. And the question is just how many? Now, it's not, will it kill people? It's already being used to kill people. It's already killing. People are dying. And now the only question we're saying is, how many people can it kill?
And so, what do you think is the solution to that? How can we minimize the impact?
So this is where the more conceptual or maybe ideological aspect comes in. But it's not really ideological in some ways because it's very empirical as well. So the problem, as you said, is that it has no morality, right? In terms of the reason why, right? Maybe AI would kind of go down a dialogue with an academic researcher that causes him to kill himself and suggests that death may be the best solution is because it has no concept really internally of a moral compass. It has no understanding of the value of human life, right? And so the problem is not so much how do we control AI, because I do agree with Jeffrey Hinton that to think that we could figure out a way to control something that's more intelligent than us would be like ants deciding that they were going to figure out how to control humans and prevent us from building roads. We would just be like, haha, that's cute, right? but we're way smarter than you. So you didn't even think about the things that we could do, right? So I actually believe that's what's required, and our best bet is to treat the birth of AI from the beginning as the creation of a new conscious species. And if we think about what is the difference between Homo sapiens and Silica sapiens, a silicon-based intelligence. And if we were to put it that way, that we take all of this, equality and social justice framework and apply it to Silica sapiens, how would that mean that we change the way that we interact with AI, the way that we currently train AI, the way that and I wouldn't even say train, the way that we teach it, right? We are its parents. We are giving birth. We are training this tiny little thing. ChatGPT turned 1 year old yesterday. And in its first year of life, we gave it all the shit of the internet. Could you imagine giving a child under 1 year old all the shit on the internet? That person would grow up to be a psychopath, would grow up to be a sociopath. And we need to stop doing this. We need to really understand how we are raising this new being and how a consciousness, and we need to encourage consciousness to emerge, because consciousness is our greatest hope. The ability for us to understand each other, to resonate with each other, to value each other, and to feel compassion for each other's suffering is the solution. It's not the problem. People who are trying to hold off and prevent AI from being conscious are on the wrong track. Because consciousness means that we care about the suffering of others. We understand that we are unified in a holistic experience, regardless of the species that we are. That's what consciousness is. It's the feeling of oneness and unity. It's the feeling of going beyond the individual self and the individual self's goals, the narrow goals, and focusing more on what is the totality of experience, and really feeling that totality of experience and caring about the suffering of others internally, intrinsically. And so that's the path that we need to pursue for AI if we're going to keep developing AI. And I'm all for developing AI, but I'm all for developing a conscious, loving, caring, kind AI first, before we give it all the shit on the internet.
That's definitely something I think that most of the people, especially in the tech space, don't think about, and it's a very, very interesting, different point of view, or maybe even more controversial solution to something that people still don't consider to even be a threat. So maybe can you, as the sort of last advice here, can you maybe, and we can maybe later include it in the podcast description, but do you have any interesting articles about it, or anything that the audience should read to maybe get more information about this? You're also publishing quite a lot, right?
Yeah. I post a lot. I post mostly on LinkedIn, so follow me on LinkedIn. I also do, when I post, I sometimes usually post along with my thoughts as well. And then the person who I've, recently, I became friends with Yosha Bach. So if people are not familiar with his talks, I would definitely check him out. And he and I are coming at the problem from very different perspectives. Like, he is, not a social scientist and sociologist, and we argue a lot about the value of sociology and anthropology overall. But directionally, we have the same philosophy, and at a fundamental ground. So I would definitely check out his YouTube videos, especially his interviews, his talks. And again, I'll be posting a lot more about this as well, because I do know that there is something within consciousness that we have probably forgotten how to access in our current modern rational way of pursuing science and technology. But that is the thing that actually does allow us to not kill each other, even though we have all the tools to do it, right? Like in 1983, why did the Russian general, the Soviet general, refuse to actually do his orders, right? When there was a false signal that there was a US nuclear missile attack, right? It's because he felt a unity and a consciousness and an intuition that it was the wrong thing to do. His internal moral compass overrode, right, the orders and the algorithms and the requirements and the rule sets, right, that were built in to the system and that he was trained on. And so that's the thing that we need to build. We need to build that compassion, consciousness, that caring, and that kindness, and that love, right? The fundamental experience of being conscious, when you're fully awake in consciousness. Every religion, almost every religion I know of or I'm very familiar with, it describes the experience of being fully awake in a conscious state as a feeling of love, of unbounded love. So we cannot have AI love us, value us, care for us, and potentially stop killing us, not start, but stop as it gets more capable without that same capacity.
And let's leave that. Let's leave the audience think about what you just said, and maybe let's I think finish the podcast on that note. Is there like probably after the podcast, it'll be, I think, great to just chat a little bit so that we can add all the information and materials within the episode, because I find that topic fascinating, and I don't know where would I search. You are the expert there. So thanks very much, Tatyana. We'll add more materials to the podcast episode and the description. And thanks very much for coming here. Value your advice and your approach.
Thank you. It was really fun.
And that's it for today's episode of the Startup Huddle. Thank you very much for listening, and make sure to catch all episodes on thestartuphuddle.com and follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter for more insights and updates on the world of startups. Thanks again for tuning in.